Thank you all for being here. I have had recurring dreams, I think for the last 2 or 3 years, of conferences. Usually I'm trying to get there. Commonly, I'm at the airport and remember that I left my passport at home. But sometimes I get there, and then I'm in a hotel, and sometimes I'm speaking. So this is the dream. Dave, you were going to hold up EPO. Now, I'm not sure that everyone here knows Gebser's book, The Ever-Present Origin. I mean, I don't assume that you do. This is it. And you can.
Size 9 font.
And it is available online, by the way. There's an online version. Deb already highlighted how Gebser acknowledges Aurobindo and Teilhard very clearly. In the index to that book, however, you will find a lot of references to Carl Jung in a psychological vein, shall we say. There are important connections being made between Gebser and Jung, and more to be made. I have been blessed to teach Gebser, basic Jung, some of Aurobindo and Teilhard, also to many hundreds of people. I am learning, always learning. Here now in the city of St. Francis, I am endeavoring to comprehend this conference in its fullness as I feel the world that is not comprehensible to multitudes of our fellow human beings. How does this city, or any city of the world, actually function? How does everything work? How does anything work? And a lot of work, a whole lot of work does go into all the workings in so many dimensions at all scales of magnitude. I honor all that work, teaching, serving. Gebser says, I try to learn from everything that happens to me. So be it. I'm going to give a talk at a major conference in San Francisco next week, I said, as she was trimming my hair, such as it is. What about? She asked. I thought and thought. Prophecy is what I said. Oh, she said, what's that? Well, it's usually associated with foretelling the future, I said, making predictions, but that's not what it's all about. And I thought if I should carry the conversation on. Prophecy has come about as the point of departure right now. Prophecy as a way of knowing, a mode of awareing. This is not a linear journey. Emergent entanglement, maybe. Emergency entanglement is the felt sense for me. Our common emergency, the planetary transmutation that is here and now here. To take a quick temporic leap to the year 1970 as an attractor, if only to mention that was the year I happened upon the thought of Teilhard, Aurobindo, and Gebser all of a sudden, all at once. I was 19 years old, a college sophomore, majoring in communications and philosophy, and the intention had formed for me to express a mystical sense of wholeness that had very complexly come to shape all my life experiences of the world at that time. I won't do a chronology of 1970 or the late 60s right now. It would be better probably to supply a playlist. The first Earth Day happened in 1970. when human population was 3.8 billion individuals. Now we are joining with a global community of 8.1 billion, as you know. As you know, India is now the world's most populous nation. 1,428,627,663 souls I found online. That number is incomprehensible to me, but I can contextualize it with awarenings that came with my journey to India 25 years ago. A little more about that later. What I will say is that for 50 plus years, I have lived with and lived out these world prophecies as best I can discern them, with changes in planetary life now accelerating exponentially. I want to share with you something of how these prophecies have informed and continue to inform my teaching, my art, and all my relationships, my heart journey, my silent prayers and spoken prayers. At age 73, my concerns focus on the survival of my grandchildren and all the little children of the world, including all the juveniles of all the species, alive or soon to be, as we are now witnessing the death of an age simultaneously with the birthing of an age. Mysterium tremendum et fascinans. Behold the tremendum. Whatsoever is becoming, whatsoever is not yet. Another temporic adventure, if you would care to take a short imaginary walk, won't take long. Come with me to northeastern Tennessee, my natal ground. My feelings are crystalline in the flesh of that Appalachian earth. In my sacrum, I feel where my bones came from, where the bones of my ancestors of about 5 generations, my parents, my beloved sister, my dear brother, and so many others lie buried. And it is the ground that was sacred to countless generations of the indigenous societies, the Cherokees and their forebears, who dwelled there and called the place sacred. And we are going to a sacred place to begin with, but it is little known and little noticed. It exists in very plain sight, but you probably wouldn't notice unless I take you there. Embedded in a limestone formation that is now a creek bed under a small wooden bridge are several elegant snail shells, equiangular spirals, easier to see and easier not to see. This is a maclurite. I just noticed you're going to present. You can, yeah. So, perfect. There you go. I was enjoying the multidimensionality of speaker view. Yeah. This is a maclurite, a marine creature that was fully alive in the mid-Ordovician age about 460 million years ago. I mean, all these numbers are connecting, right? When these creatures lived, who lived in these shells, I took that picture, by the way, when these animals sprang forth on the earth and lived and died, there were no land animals. The first land plants were emerging. When these life forms twirled and curled into equiangular spirals, the matrix of stone in which their fossils now lie was far south of the equator in Gondwana. It's been a long journey to become East Tennessee, as it is now known and unknown and unknowable. I was born nearby to grow up and become known and knowable to many others of my East Tennessee kinfolk. There are plenty of them. I must mention Sawmill Holler as we pass through it. Holler is how we say hollow back in the hills. I can talk Southern. My remembrances are not primarily visual. I can describe for you the proprioceptive awarenings when I was baptized by full immersion in the baptistry of Oak Grove Baptist Church in the country. Acoustic remembrances are acute. The old familiar hymns of the 19th century and older origins. My family was religious, and many hundreds of times my three sisters and I piled into the family Ford and drove off down the road to church. I had zero awareness of those machlorites shining there in the creek bed rock. The road to the holler is old. Its path is very, very old, arising in the unknowable vastness of originary temporics. When a great many land animals, large animals, migrating buffalo, followed the natural bend in the Holston River, the Hogoheche. This animal trail became a major human migration route from east of the Appalachian Divide to the west. Much blood was shed. My Anglo-European ancestors stayed there. The God images that sustained the numinous energies of the churches were mostly those of Methodist, Baptist, and a few Presbyterian traditions. And it was at church, at my mother's knee, where I heard the names of the Hebrew prophets. Loudly and clearly, I feel these prophetic names as blazing sonorities rooted at the base of my spine. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Obadiah, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Zechariah. These were the men to speak. Thus saith the Lord. Yet with far greater thunder, I heard preached the prophecies of St. John the Divine in the book of Revelation, those visions and images of the final conflict. These prophecies too are coded up and down my spine and in my somatic remembrances. These writers meant business. It was folly, dangerous folly, and sinful to ignore them and their words of creation and destruction. These Hebrew and Christian points of departure can erupt and explode for me at any moment. I feel apocalyptic trauma, archaic forces, archaic wounding, and archaic rage in the depths, in the spirit of my ancestors. This very same old roadway to church was earlier traveled by British soldiers, by flatboaters, Daniel Boone, by Presidents Jackson and Johnson and Polk, chief executives traversing their paths from the newly conquered West to the young nation's capital. This is where prophecy came to hold a meaning for me. With Appalachian frontier impressions, ghostly transgressions, deeply hidden. It's a harrowing moral journey from here to there and back again. With all the prophesying, it was a different world then. This very roadway to the holler, to the country, with a sturdy little bridge now across the Ordovicians, led further southwestward to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the electromagnetic separation plant known as Y12 became fully operational for enriching the uranium that destroyed Nagasaki on 6 August 1945. The device had been tested 16 July 1945 at Los Alamos, New Mexico. Radiation from the Trinity test has been detected widely around the Earth. And it is that date in July 45 that some have now proposed as the crack of an age, the eruption of the Anthropocene. 16 July 1945. I cannot recall a time when I was not aware of the atomic bomb. This is a photograph of the Trinity test at 53 thousandths of a second after detonation, 100 meters. Some of my kinfolk worked in Oak Ridge, but they told no stories. Maybe I could feel the radiation from all the bombs, all the nuclear detonations of the 1950s. I feel I have always lived with Angst, as Gebser says, primordial anxiety. I do remember in my bones the fear of nuclear annihilation, the image of the vaporization of the whole world within 15 minutes notice. These terrors melded perfectly with the prophecies of the second coming of Christ and the beasts of the apocalypse. So there you have the formation of my personal complex, my fascination with the atomic bomb. We have very complex minds. A primary concern for me to this day is integrating the fear, the anxiety. This does not manifest in fears of my personal mortality, though nowadays it seems my whole life is always passing before my eyes. It is cinesthetic. But I am speaking, as we all are at this conference, of the forces that are impinging upon all our emplacements. I think of all the babies, the little children of the world, the juveniles of every species who must grow up to integrate the fix we are in. Is this prophecy? Humanity has opened the gates of hell. Horrendous heat is having horrendous effects. Distraught farmers watching crops carried away by floods, sweltering temperatures spawning disease, and thousands fleeing in fear as historic fires rage. Climate action is dwarfed by the scale of the challenge. Those are the words of Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, last week in New York City, convening world leaders for the first ever UN Climate Ambition Assembly. Apocalypse and/or metamorphosis. I feel that I could join with those ancient Middle Eastern prophets who were known to go into a trance, shrieking, shouting, and rolling about. I can be freaked out of my own self. I can feel myself to be an anxiety entity, free floating in the noosphere. How do you sleep at night? I feel beaten up prophetically, battered and dismembered. Archetypal grief, archaic wounding, intergenerational trauma, cultural complexes, ghostly matters. To be healed and to be whole, how does that feel? Can we share that? I am deeply devoted to the possibilities of all human hopes existing in this very moment. All those who are struggling for basic freedom and truthful justice, for life itself. Where do we go from here? How do we speak? What language do we use? How do we pray? How do we speak together to pray? How do we continue the work? I always feel better after we have shared heartful time together. Time-free spiritual time together. Dance and sing. The integral yoga can be a form of listening to the music of life exactly as it is, resonating in infinite channels of cosmic resonance. Whatsoever is happening. While we are all shaken by the planetary thunder, the trill of a finch can more than suffice. How do we continue to live with the forces that we humans are manipulating with all our might, presuming to have things under control? How do we live out this Promethean fire? All instincts are at play in the mix. Our personal impulses are now global. Driving through the Silicon Valley yesterday, the center of the cyber psychic revolution, I felt explosions of insanity regarded as just the cost of doing business. Prophesying as economic forecasting. New technological horizons. Prophesying, as I experience it, is a practice of truthfulness about the ultimate concerns of Angst and Vertrauen, as Gebser put it, primordial anxiety and primordial trust. Primordial trust. Prophesying is living every aspect of our livings and our dyings in all the temporic fields, in every scintilla, among the shards of decay, in the splatterings of blood. Nothing is left out. My father taught me everything he knew how to teach. He was a country boy. My mother did too. He grew up. She was a country girl. She grew up. Their spirits are here. I have sculpted an ancestral figurine, a shrine to all the ancestors, your ancestors too. The living and the dead. Everybody is now here. In the ages of the ages, in secularum. In the early morning hours, I wake up thinking planetarily and my heart starts racing, the overwhelmingness. And there are very, very good reasons to be worried. Our perpetual and all-infusing state of emergency as a form of prophecy. I am building shrines and treasuries. I think I felt the radioactive fallout from that Trinity test in vitro, sealed in my intrauterine call. As a new world burst open at the same time I did. I felt proprioceptive awaring that humankind would now be adapting to unfamiliar conditions in the merging of creation and destruction. We should have, all of us, some sobering sense of what we humans are capable of. A shocking sense, an appalling sense, a desperate sense, and a hopeful sense. We humans are called to make this journey to a place we do not know, into the unknowable unfolding as it is. In April 1971, I wrote a college paper called Orders of Experience, Integral Consciousness and the Metaphysics of Love. I learned about Gebser in a book by P.J. Sahir called Eastern Wisdom and Western Thought. Gebser wrote the foreword to that book. I wrote this. It is inherent to the nature of integral consciousness and the integral worldview that all things, all motions, all thoughts and actions are relevant. All that is flows together. Nothing is diminished or excluded. Marshall McLuhan prophesied total change. I wrote, evolution is a vortex of an explosive spiral. James Joyce says, here comes everybody. And how are we doing with our collective planetary karma? I wrote, in integral consciousness, the great paradox, the world and all its many facets are as they always were, only the way in which reality is apprehended is totally different. Well, I look in the mirror at my aging face and see the too muchness of 10,000 masks, or at least a good 1,000. Of all the actual concretized lived scenarios I have been or am no longer party to. I wrote, the complexities and magnitudes of the crisis in which we find ourselves are such that nothing short of a spiritual transformation is adequate to the remedy. A revolution of such a nature that political and social disturbances will follow in its wake as tornadoes surround a typhoon. I see much good being done out there, in here, out there. Thank you very much. There are creative advances, adventures of consciousness, meaningful achievements. There are cosmic and supra-cosmic harmonies within the chaos. Mysteriouser and mysteriouser, how it is all unfolding, how the divine drama is playing out. Bewusstseinsspannung. Say it. Bewusstseinsspannung. Consciousness tension. How do we connect personally and collectively, as Jung says, with the spirit of the depths and the spirit of the times? Complexities, complexes. We all have them, or they have us, with their efficiencies and deficiencies, archaic impulses, magic, mythic enchantments, mental strategies and elaborations. There are true prophecies and false prophecies. There are demonic forces at work in the world, and within and between and among us. We need ways of speaking transformatively, transmutationally, to respond to each other, to respond to one another truthfully, volitionally, across the planetary extensions of our minds, through our ways of worshiping differently in the cycles of birth and death and rebirth and resurrection. Jung prophesies the transformation of God image as the transformation of self-image as well. The Christification of many, Jung says, answer to Job. Teilhard speaks of the harmony between a religion of the Christic type and evolution of convergent type. Gebser proclaims the achronon, the future that is already and not yet with us, including the hours of death for each one of us that will arrive. Skipping the temporix to 1997, I was in the Aurobindo Bhavan in Bangalore 25 years ago. I was there at a time of deep vulnerability and perplexity and agony in my personal life. It was a felt sense there for me in Bangalore. Healing, wholeness, passages of light, darshan. In an afternoon with Aurobindo and the mother as felt presences that have never left. I remember vividly a journey on another day to Mysore, to Chamundi Hill, the temple of the Durga manifesting Kali. I have sculpted many images of Kali. I burn Song of India temple incense. It's like heaven in my garage studio where I sculpt in tantric modes and attend Zoom sessions. I hear the drone of a sitar, a morning raga, such as we heard this morning. Varanasi at sunrise, divinitudes, tears rolling down my cheeks. I am a toddler in northeastern Tennessee. I am a 20-year-old walking the shores of Lake Michigan, discovering integral consciousness by way of phenomenology and systematic theology. I am a 30-year-old with good friends on a summit in Colorado. I am a nearly 50-year-old at the Vivekananda Yoga Center about 30 kilometers south of Bangalore. I am a 60-year-old partaking of the Eucharist in my parish church at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. I am a 70-year-old, well, 70 plus, interpreting various texts at the Gebser conference at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, with a felt sense of reaching out to my grandchildren, ages 2 to 13. Speaking of prophecies is something of why I am here to be with you. May we feel vertrauen, sharing this as we may, primordial trust, all together. A childlike trust it must be for me. As when a child smiles, when I see children at play, when I hear children's laughter. This is Sri Aurobindo. The one rule of the Gnostic life would be the self-expression of the spirit, the will of the divine being. That will, that self-expression could manifest through extreme simplicity or through extreme complexity, or in their natural balance. For beauty and plenitude, a hidden sweetness and laughter in things, a sunshine and gladness of life are also powers and expressions of the spirit. Its possession of itself and its possession of life and the power of the spirit is a new consciousness in which humanity itself shall find its own self-exceeding and self-fulfillment by the revelation of the divinity that is striving for birth within. The divinity that is striving for birth within us is almost exactly word for word what Carl Jung says, answer to Job, and what Teilhard says, and Jean Gebser, and so many others. What are we doing now? What does the thunder say? Jean Gebser. What is decisive for us is to know in any given instance where and how to act passively or actively, where and how to make things happen, or let things happen to us. Everything hinges on this knowledge of letting happen and making happen. There are many spiritual gifts. We can serve and heal, we can teach, research, interpret, dance, and sing. We can weave and sculpt the earth, the fire, the water, the air. Satchidananda. Om. Om. Shanti. 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 My current sculpture, I should say, I am that sculpture's companion. The title came to me through several different titles, but it was just image. But then as I was typing it on the word processing, it came out misspelled. I-M-A-A-G-O. Imago. Thank you.